I'm Heidi Huttner, and I'm a professor at Stony Brook University, and I direct the Sustainability Studies program. This is Earthstock Week. It's our celebration of Earth Day. And our special guest is John Warner, Dr. John Warner. He is a green chemist. He's one of the founders of green chemistry, and he is our special speaker at Earthstock and for our Earth Day celebrations this week at Stony Brook University, 2016. And I'm also here with my class. I want to welcome them. This is my students from my class. My class is called Environmental Writing and Media. And we meet regularly. They're making little films of their own and short 3-minute films. And are my co-teachers here, Chung, and she's working with them on the actual filmmaking. Cool. And she's an artist. So we're here to talk with the students and take questions. And John, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Glad to have you. So would anyone like to ask questions?
Yeah. Dr. Warner, I hear there's a story about your hands that's relatable to your work in green chemistry. Could you go into a little depth into that?
Okay. A little embarrassing, but it's okay. I was born with a version of psoriasis called Van Besenbesch syndrome, pustular psoriasis, where the palms of my hands and the soles of my feet, just there, would erupt in really bad psoriasis and be all pussy and bleeding and nasty. And every 2 or 3 years I'd have a flare-up where I couldn't stand and couldn't hold something, but other than that I was fine. And it would last for about a month and then go away. And then come back a couple of years later and go away. And that's just the way my life was. And when I started working in industry at Polaroid, I had a flare-up. And spontaneously bleeding all over your lab is a career-limiting thing. And so I had to do something. And so I subscribed to this experimental therapy called PUVA phototherapy, where they shined light, UV light, on my hands and my feet for an hour a day, 3 days a week for 9 months. And it cured me. It kind of pushed it into my joint, so I do have psoriatic arthritis, but at least I don't have it on my skin anymore. But while I was doing it, I learned the mechanism of what was happening. And it turns out that the DNA in our cells have 4 base pairs. One of them is thymine. The UV light shines on the thymine and has it do a photoreaction that ultimately kills the cell. Now, DNA doubles when a cell is duplicating. What psoriasis is a rapidly duplicating cell. And what happens is it's duplicating a lot faster than the normal cells, so they die and the body's autoimmune system attacks it, and that's what causes all the nastiness. So if you shoot UV light on the hands, the faster developing cells die faster than the slower developing cells, and if you dose it right, that's what you do. That's kind of the way cancer chemotherapy works, is the same way, is that cancer is developing faster than the healthy cells. And so we lose our hair and become nauseous because hair and mucosal cells in our intestines are the fastest growing cells. And so when we get chemotherapy, the cancer gets it, our hair gets it, and the intestinal lining gets it. So that's just kind of the mechanism here. And so I looked at that and said, okay, here's the photochemistry of thymine. Thymine is a DNA-based pair. It's abundant in nature, obviously non-toxic and safe. What if and there's so many plastics that fail to accomplish our needs. All the nasty plastics, they work fine. All the bio-based plastics nobody's using because they don't quite work well. What if I took thymine, put it into a bio-based plastic, shine light, and change the properties of the plastics to improve and change them using this bio-based mechanism? And it worked. And so now we've got a bunch of products that are based off of that fundamental mechanism of thymine photochemistry into a bunch of different products.
Good question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
So you said your lab was moving away from publishing papers and focusing more on inventions. Yeah. I just wanted to know how you are reaching out to other chemists in labs around the world.
By coming here. All right, that what I have found is after being in academia for a long time, in 2007, I had probably about 250 publications. I'm very well published. I've got a lot of papers out there. And what I realized is that when a group of scientists are trying to invent a problem to solve for society, and the scientist says to themselves, if I succeed, great, I solved the problem. If I don't succeed, well, that's okay. I'll publish a bunch of papers and get some lines on my resume. You get a no-lose scenario. So I said to myself, if I stop publishing papers, if the only success is solving the problem, then all of us at my company would be focused on what is truly important and not have this efforts and energy being spent doing things that aren't solving the problems. And interesting enough, it's worked really well. We are statistically got a lot more products out in the time spent that we've done, and just we've only really been in business for 7-8 years, and we've got a lot of products out. And maybe there's other reasons, but one of the reasons I think is because of that philosophy of not publishing. Now again, I'm on the road a lot, coming and speaking at places like this to continue my dissemination and my responsibility to disseminate the information, but the academic publication, I don't know that that's all that important. I think statistically, especially in chemistry and material sciences, most academic publications are never read once. And yet it's the currency of success, how many papers we publish. I don't want to be part of that. I want to be part of solving problems.
So do you abandon, like say a project's going south, and rather than continue working on it and getting your publication, do you just abandon the project now, or? Sadly,
that's, thank God it hasn't happened too often, but that's what we would do, because then those people, so there's a choice. Okay, sit in your office and meet the needs of some peer reviewer somewhere that's going to say, I want you to do this, I want you to do this, and spend an enormous amount of time getting that paper out, or stopping and inventing the next technology. I'd rather be inventing the next technology.
Also a really good question. Other questions?
Do we have access to the products your lab creates?
Some of them are already out, okay? And so the hair care thing is a company called Hairprint. I licensed it. So what we do is I think of an idea and we start inventing it. And then it gets to a certain point and we decide, are we going to start our own company and commercialize it, or will we license it to another company? The hair product we decided to license, and the company's name is Hairprint. And myhairprint.com, it's been on sale for over a year. It's a product and it's doing pretty well. I also came up with an asphalt technology. There's 1 billion miles of road in the United States. Every year, 10% gets dug up and repaved. Because of the sun in the air, it gets oxidized and brittle, and all we do is put it in a landfill. Maybe we take 5%, regrind it, and put it down, but the country's getting filled with these landfills of old asphalt. I said, why can't I? So my dream is to invent the street Zamboni that essentially comes down, digs up old, and just paves. That's it, done. Right now, we can't do that. But my intermediary solution is I go back to the asphalt plant. I invented an additive that we put in to allow you to use 60, 70% recycled material. And that's called Delta S is the name of the product. The company we started was called Collaborative Aggregates, and we're all over the country selling, paving roads with this additive to increase. Those are the two that are right now tangible products in the real one. The next one to come is, last week I was up in Edmonton, Canada. Well, my company was up in Edmonton, Canada. We've come up with, I don't know if you've been familiar with the issues of formaldehyde in wood products, lumber liquidators and all this. We came up with OSB is the construction lumber that is most used in North America. And we came up with a replacement adhesive that the wood is better, or at least as good as incumbent formaldehyde wood, has the same cost, but without a drop of formaldehyde, we're really excited. Something like a 70-ton pilot scale run up in Canada last week. So we're really excited about that one. And
that's a really big issue, because the cost of the wood that doesn't have their formaldehyde is prohibitive.
Well, that's the problem. When everyone says, what's the problem here, is And that's my whole philosophy is, if a green technology is 10 times more expensive than the incumbent technology, then only the wealthy can afford it. And that's just not fair. So it's the job of the chemist to have it be superior performance, superior cost, and oh, by the way, it's sustainable. The moment we have games where things are more expensive or don't really work, that's fundamentally not sustainable, and it's a chemistry problem. Get back in the lab and do a better job. But if those chemists haven't been trained what makes something sustainable, we're stuck with a handful of examples that we talk about over and over and over again. I'm worried about who's going to invent the next. The way I look at it is, of all the products that are available to our society today, only about 10% are truly sustainable. 90% of them have something wrong. There is this process called alternatives assessment, where someone can look in the supply chain for some better technology. In my opinion, that can only be successful 20% of the time. So today, 2016, 65 to 70% of the technologies haven't been invented yet. And that's what I mean about this epic battle of good and evil. People are not hoarding successful technologies out of greed. They fundamentally haven't been invented yet. And how could they be if no university is training chemists to understand mechanistic toxicology and environmental mechanisms? That is the conundrum. Until every university in the country is training scientists and sees it as a moral and ethical requirement. How can you hand someone a diploma, pat them on the head, say, go invent technologies for society, and it doesn't really matter if it's toxic or not. It doesn't really matter. We're not going to teach you even how to recognize that. That's what we're doing right now. Think about doctors, lawyers, teachers, nurses, architects, engineers, all have license. They can't practice their trade unless they have and maintain a license, usually to make sure they're doing it safely. No such thing in chemistry. Anyone can make a molecule and put it in a product having no clue whether it's carcinogenic or toxic. And we need to change the field of chemistry to recognize that is the first and most important thing. All through society, if we went to a 3rd grade or a 7th grade or a 9th grade class and I held up a glass and I said, here is a chemical, how would you describe it? Someone's going to say it's a solid, it's a liquid. Someone will say it's colorless. Someone might say it boils at 100 degrees, it freezes at... No one would say it's not toxic. It has this impact. For some reason, we in society have dissociated the description of something and its toxicity and environmental impact. Until we just see that as merely another description of matter and tackle it in the same way we do everything else, we're stuck where we are. We just got to change society's view of materials to see toxicity, environmental impact is the same thing as melting point and boiling point.
Other questions?
Do you have any thoughts or projects regarding agriculture, conventional corporate versus sustainable?
Yes. I have a lot of opinions on agriculture too, but my biggest issue with agriculture has to do with persistence. I'm not going to get into the debate of whether pesticides, herbicides are required or not. That's a huge moral and philosophical debate. But let's make the assumption that we do need pesticides and things like that. A pesticide, by definition, kills life. From a green chemistry perspective, you're going to be killing something. Now, if we accept that these materials are necessary, the best thing we can do is make sure that they don't last very long, that you put them on the crop and they in no way get out into where you don't want them. And so my science, I call it non-covalent derivatization, and I won't go into it, is to take a material and make it, while in storage, stable. But the moment you apply it, it starts to degrade into innocuous byproducts. So you still, if people want to kill things, they're killing things, but it doesn't kill forever. So number one is to have that planned built-in degradation to innocuous byproducts. And the second is to increase the specificity. So if there is a certain thing you're trying to attack, make sure you attack it and only it. It's a really hard thing to do, but that's what I'm trying to do.
And that's the opposite of what's been done. We have all these persistent organic chemicals out there that are still, all the PCBs sitting in the Hudson River or wherever else, and they're all over the place, and they're not dying out.
And it's so frustrating because most regulatory agencies, the first criteria to get permission to use a product is to show it's stable. If the thing was decomposing, you wouldn't get permission to use it. It's going to decay on the shelf. We're going to have to worry about its efficacy. So in a way, it's completely orthogonal to what we need, but drugs are the same thing. Pharmaceuticals have to be shown to be immortal. And so when we get overprescribed and we excrete it out into the waterways, all these persistent, highly active materials are accumulating in our environment. And interestingly enough, that is what people have to do. They may not want to do it, but to get approval from the FDA, you've got to show that it lives forever. The molecule is, and that's why I'm trying to come up with this model of temporary existence and to have things, because most things in the real life world don't live forever. That's called an ecological cycle. It's very artificial to have.
Biomimicry.
Biomimicry is one way of looking at it, yeah.
So, but that's a regulatory question, right? So if that's how the FDA approves things now, you'd have to change that too.
I would rather invent molecules than tackle that.
So you could,
okay. Yeah, politics, oh my God, yeah. Someone else better do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm way too impatient. We'd be thrown out of the room. Yeah.
More questions. These are great questions.
This may be a broad question, but how do you come up with that? Like, it seems like you have something for like every possible area, an idea or a product for every. Like, how did you? But like the hairprint, how did you come up with that? Like,
I don't know.
like did it just pop in your head? Like,
so the story of hairprint, honest to God, is I have a professor friend who he's a biologist who studies what's called insect sclerotization. What insect sclerotization is when a beetle gets bigger, its exoskeleton can't grow, so it breaks off. All right, and then you get this soft white thing that over the course of a couple hours turns hard and black. Okay, and so that's a biological process that goes from white to black. This guy, he's been studying this for years, and he used to tell me the story that in his refrigerator at home, he got thousands and thousands of dead bugs and ground them up and had white and beige and pink and orange, and in his home refrigerator had all these dead bug carcasses, and I had this mental image of going from white to dark. And I said, well, gee whiz, coloring hair goes from white to dark. I wonder how this process works. If here is something that happens in a physiological system, so then I delved into it and looked at what the biochemistry was. And for anyone in biology, it's called a tyrosinase cascade, where tyrosine undergoes these chemicals. Say, okay, I wonder if I could just take something like that and in a beaker do it and have it go from white to black. And I did, and he goes, hey, it works. So then I called somebody that sold me some hair. I got some gray hair, and I stuck it in and go, it works. And so, but what was really interesting is some of the hair was dark black, some of the hair was light brown, some of the hair was dark. So it's like it frustrated me because it was all over the place. And so that's when I realized that it was actually restoring the color hair instead of painting it and dyeing it. And that's my whole philosophy is, and I get what this called my 5 elements of innovation, all right, and it's part of this book that I wrote, is that invention doesn't happen in the focal point, it happens in the periphery. And what is in people waste so much time trying to come up with the perfect plan, the perfect strategy. They are so smart, they're going to be focused and they're going to do this, they're going to do this, they're going to do this. And usually they waste time and never actually get going because they're waiting for that perfect plan. You know what? No one's smart enough to have the right plan. Do something, and then whatever happens, be observant and figure out what to do with it. And so it's just the philosophy of putting the ego aside and recognizing we're not perfect, but if we do something, there's just a chance something good might come of it.
So would that have happened if you were writing a scientific paper? That process?
No. Not a chance, because what would have happened is the reviewer would say, "What is the mechanism of this? You know, it's so amazing. This. One of the problems I have with medical research is a lot of medical researchers have their theory of how to cure a disease. And sadly, this is going to sound really pessimistic, but I feel that a lot of medical researchers, if they're doing an experiment and they stumble upon a way of curing a disease, but it's not consistent with their theory and they just throw out the result, because what's important is their theory and mechanism. I try to do the opposite. Take the ego completely out of it. I'll construct a theory. I'll say to myself, okay, this hydrogen has to be here, this oxygen has to be here, and I'll come up with a potential solution based on that theory. But I don't really care about the theory. If I end up accomplishing my task and do what I set out to do, I'm done. And what I find interesting is there'll be many scientists afterwards coming up and saying, "John, your theory is wrong." And I go, "What are you talking about? I solved the problem. Who cares?" You know, it's kind of like, you know, imagine a friend of mine asks me for a map to get them to New York. So I come out and I give them a map. They call me from Times Square and I go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I gave you the map is wrong." And they say, "What are you talking about? I'm here in New York." I go, "No, the map is wrong." That's kind of the way we look at science. It's the theory is more important than the destination. And it's really crazy. And so we got to let go of the theory. And so publications, what you're doing is far less important than the theory that you're promoting. And no, life's too short for that.
It's so interesting. Yeah. That's where the musician comes in. Other questions?
So I have a strong contention that people aren't directly concerned with environmental issues unless it directly impacts them in a negative way. I've spoken with this with Dr. Hunter before.
Yeah.
Now, in regards to the passing of a 2-year-old, which is very unfortunate, no one should ever have to go through that. But that being said, do you feel that you would be as involved in environmental chemistry or green chemistry if that never happened?
So to be clear, I started green chemistry before my son was born. Okay, and so the transition for me, which was very real and palpable, is going from it being this is a efficient way to manufacture and to address manufacturing issues in the real world of regulations and things like that, to, oh my God, this is a moral and ethical imperative. And so I do sadly feel that most people are motivated by experiencing something negative, and that is, maybe a sad commentary, maybe it's not, maybe that's just an effective way. It's a child learns not to stick their finger in a flame because it hurts.
Exactly.
It's a very natural phenomenon to respond to pain and suffering to avoid it. And so I don't know that that's a good and evil, a good and bad thing. It's just the way things work. Negative feedback and positive feedback are kind of the yin and yang. And so if people are motivated because of tragedy, in a way, it at least gives them something out of that tragedy. But yeah, I do agree that in my experience, in this space, most people are motivated for that. But maybe even not. I will push back just a little that I hope by coming here, there are people that will say, from now on, I'm going to do things differently. I hope my speaking isn't a tragedy for them, right? Hopefully this is a positive influence. So something like this, where someone goes and hears somebody and is inspired by it and changes what they're doing from it, is a positive. Now, one could argue it's a secondary tragedy because they're responding, I am doing it because of a tragedy. But I suspect that it's so much easier to find the negative, but maybe I will challenge back that if we look really close, we'll find an equal balance to positive and negative. It's just negative is more visible.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, very interesting question.
I mean, I think about the civil rights movement, and not only black people marched.
Yeah.
Now you could say that the other people who marched maybe experienced some form of oppression, but they weren't the black people, right? They weren't the people in the South who were experiencing the direct suffering. There were white people who got on buses and put themselves on the line, put their bodies on the line, and they risked their lives. In things like, I think about the anti-nuclear movement, during the Cold War. And many people fought, and they were not directly affected by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They didn't really know directly what is it like to be somewhere where a nuclear bomb explodes. But yet, some part of them had compassion. I mean, it's a really profound question. I think it's a good one, and I hope you'll keep exploring it. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like a social science question. You need to go out and do some studies and get some data. I mean, because we can say what we feel, but
Right.
really it would be interesting to look
Yeah.
at social movements and do some research. What percentage of people are motivated to act? Then you'd have to, what would your criteria be? But it's a really important question. I do think about civil rights though, and a lot of movements, Quakers who, worked on abolition. Did they do that because they understood it, or because ethically they believed it was the right thing to do? So, but it's an excellent question though.
It is.
Other questions? Yes.
One more. So you keep mentioning that you feel a lot of responsibility as a chemist, like it's the chemist's responsibility.
Yeah.
Does that ever get overwhelming? Like, because it's almost like you're trying to regulate a system that can't be regulated without regulations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's a daunting task. It really is. And to be fully clear, I resigned. So in California, when Governor Schwarzenegger was in California, he started a chemicals policy initiative, and he sent a letter to all of industry asking, who would you like to chair this board? And then he sent a letter to all the environmental groups, who would you like to chair this board? And he got hundreds of names from both sides, and there was only one name on both lists. And so for 18 months, I was out there, and I got to tell you, it was hard, because it's just, it felt like I was shoveling sand against the tide. It didn't feel like I was making, month number 1, people are saying the following things. Month number 14, people are saying the same things. I feel like there's progress, but there's no progress. That kind of human interactions, we need to be better at it. And so maybe my cop-out is, and interestingly enough, and I mentioned this earlier, it's easier to control molecules than it is to control a process like that. So I left and I said, my gifts and skill is to be in a lab making molecules, and this isn't my forte, because I kind of shoot from the hip and I'm too spontaneous, and people need to be more careful how they talk in an environment like that. So it does get overwhelming, because to me sometimes, because I've spent over a decade in industry, I've spent over a decade in academia, I've spent almost a decade as an entrepreneur in a new company, I see the world from all the different perspectives, and to me it just seems so simple. And it's so frustrating that it's so hard to do. Yeah.
Any other questions? So I have a question for you. So this is something that I think about a lot, and it's coming up in what you've talked about today. And we also, one of my guests was Josh Fox, and he just made this movie called How to Let Go of the World. Oh gosh, it's a hard title to remember, but we'll just, How to Let Go of the World when there's climate change, and I don't know, I'm embarrassed to say, but it's a long title. So How to Let Go of the World. And in the movie, the premise of the movie is, we banned fracking in New York State. Great, and he was a part of that movement, and his film certainly spearheaded that, his film Gasland. And then he realizes, he goes back to his home, this farm, and not a farm, but his land in the country that he grew up on, which is where the beginning of Gasland starts, and he looks around and he sees the trees have this disease, and it's related to climate change, and he recognizes, okay, we stopped fracking, but we have this big problem, in the state anyway. And it's worldwide, and it's huge, and things we love are going to die. Even if we did everything perfectly right now, some of that's inevitable. And he has this sort of moment of great despair, and recognizes he wants to go around the world and see how people are dealing with despair and being upset. And I call this word eco-grief, because if anyone doing this work, and you're looking at it every day, you are seeing sad things. You are seeing the downside. So how are you dealing with that? How do you deal with eco-grief or despair?
Okay. to me, it's all about statistics and numbers, okay? The world is huge. There are so many things happening in the world. What I realize is that if I want to find reasons to despair, the world gives me plenty of reasons to despair. If I want to find reasons of hope, the world gives me plenty of reasons to hope. When I wake up in the morning, if I want to say everything is awesome, there's plenty of information to support that theory. If I wake up saying everything sucks and is bad, there's plenty of information for that. But my philosophy is that, can you imagine if Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King got up and said, I have a nightmare? All right, I think some people might have written a check, but no one would have done anything. People don't act out of despair, they recoil. People act out of the positive hope. And if we don't focus on the positive and just focus on the negative, you got a lot of unhappiness, and unhappiness sells books and sells everything, but doesn't change anything. And so if we don't focus on the positive, why bother?
I love that. And you are doing positive things.
Trying to.
I mean, you're building incredible things every day. And if everyone were doing that, imagine, and that's what your hope is, you'll inspire all these chemists to start creating things that are useful, productive, help us, but that are safe or safer.
Safer. Yeah.
Safer, not
Absolutely.
possible. And I love what you're saying, that it's impossible to create something that is perfect.
Right.
Perfect's not attainable.
But what we can do is better. And tomorrow we can do better than today. Next year we can do better. You know, I liken it to a runner that wants to run fast. They could mythically say, I want to run a 0-minute mile. A 0-minute mile is absolutely unattainable, right? But if a runner runs faster tomorrow, what if they ever hit their goal? What are they done? So having an unattainable goal that unequivocally has a direction means you always can work towards it. So just because 0 risk is unattainable doesn't for a second mean we shouldn't be working towards it.
It's beautiful and really, really well put. So any more questions from the class? Yes.
I have one more. Being that we're in an environmental writing and media class, I wanted to know your perspective on a 3-part question.
Okay.
So, do you think that the media can change our perspective on these toxic products? And what role do you think that it can play in our future? And lastly, do you think that the media is capable of creating a future where products are toxic-free on a global level?
That's an excellent question.
Love that.
And
Questions.
you know, this is again one of these points of frustration, because the media would not exist without an audience. And so does the media drive the audience, or does the audience drive the media? If the current state of affairs of how media is projected didn't work, it wouldn't be happening. And so to point to the media and to say that the media needs to change is only half of the discussion. If we have more high-quality media and people are more exposed to it, will they start figuring it out? Yes. You know, we were joking today that what the world needs is a reality TV show where people are throwing chairs saying, global warming, you know, and are talking about these very important issues in a way like Dance Moms, you know, because people love that crap.
Right.
And so if we could put and package this in that way, I think 2 things would happen. The first thing that would happen is they'd start paying attention to these issues, and they'd start seeking out other media outlets that aren't having people throw chairs. People would stop looking at shows that people are throwing chairs, they'd quiet their voice a little bit more, and they'd start caring more. And so I literally and really do endorse that we create a reality show with people screaming and throwing chairs about these issues.
So shall I throw this cup at you?
Please. But you know what I mean? And so I think that this dichotomy of the receiver of the message and the projector of the message, we're messed up. And how that happened, you know, if I could invent a time machine and go back, that would be cool, but we can't. So we're stuck in a world that has certain sets of expectations in the media, and the media has certain expectations.
Although I'm going to break in here, because I'm very much a media person. So I would say we actually are breaking in. right? So Facebook was created as a dating thing. I don't know if you watched that movie, Facebook, right? So Mark Zuckerberg created it as a way of people to meet each other. But actually, it's been claimed by people to put forth things like politics, right? And so there is this kind of, in Twitter and all of these media, we now have control of them. Which is why part of our assignment in the class is that they're supposed to take a little control of the media too, and see if it works. So I think you can, you know, the TV and those horrible fight it out shows we don't like.
Well, it'd be interesting to see if, you know, there are Facebook posts that are the equivalent of throwing chairs, and there are Facebook quotes that are the equivalent of a whisper. It'll be interesting to see which ones get more likes.
Right, and then there's also the question of how many they're allowing to be seen. There's a lot of control of that, but these are all really good questions. So do you feel like your question was answered about the media, though?
Yes.
My question is to you. Do you all feel that the media has the potential to change some of these ideas and also to be activists, to be educational about environmental issues? You all have been participating in this all semester. Do you think it does? You don't have to.
I think so.
Absolutely.
Do you think so?
Definitely.
I think part of it is the audience, but yeah, I think so.
I think that it does, just because, I mean, it motivates people to do other things, like get cars and, you know, buy these products, like makeup products that are like, because of the way that it's portrayed, like as beauty. So I feel like if things were shifted more towards the environment, I think definitely it would impact people.
I mean, you saw the Cove, right? And you've seen Blackfish. Look what's happening to SeaWorld. They're getting a lot of pushback.
They sure are.
And that's Twitter, that's Facebook, that's those films. So it can be. I mean, it takes effort, and it takes people being as inventive. This is going to be my argument. As inventive as you are with chemistry, both having the knowledge to do it, but and the awareness of how important it is to spread certain kinds of messages and information, and also being skilled at it, right? Not everybody has the skill or the interest, but for some people, they could be very creative with it and make change.
I do. I believe if people hear the message and understand and embrace the message, most, not all, will do the right thing. And so the real barrier is to get that message to them. And in a way, it's a synonymous to what I mean about green chemistry.
Right.
Chemists are making nasty molecules not because they want to, but because they don't know that there's another way. The moment they learn that there's another way, they just see it as obvious and they then do it. So the key event is communication. And always, in almost all cases.
And education.
As a form of communication. Education and communication are kind of hand in hand.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous. So if we educate people and so they have more information, they can understand something, it'll make a difference.
And I think from a marketing perspective, some companies are starting to figure this out. You know, I hate to use foul language, but I'll say I stink phenomenon. Most people wake up in the morning and they look at themselves in the mirror and they say, I'm a terrible person, I stink. Everything I do is hurting the environment. And if some company says, by buying this toothpaste, you're saving the rainforest, you're doing something. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. I hope it's true and authentic. But now, what a gift to give that person that now some small piece of their life by picking that toothbrush when they're looking in the mirror. Maybe they say to themselves, maybe I don't suck as much as I thought I did. And again, having people positively motivated in their ability to change is critical. And so the last thing we want to do is stop that company from selling that toothpaste. We want to push it to have it better and better and better. But if we just throw stones saying that's not good enough, we lose that opportunity.
Okay. So thank you all for this great conversation, for your questions.
Fantastic
really
questions.
Fantastic. Oh, we have another one.
One more. So as a green chemist, what is your favorite part of the job?
To be honest with you,
Is it being in the lab every day, or when you can?
I guess this is going to be a lousy answer, but it's the fact that it's all of that. That I can wake up in the morning and be a communicator at 10 o'clock, be working in anti-cancer chemotherapy at 11 o'clock, be talking to a company about their strategy of sustainability in ozone depletion or something. The fact that I have this gifted, precious ability, you know, opportunity to play in all these different spaces. It's all of it. And that's what I love the most about it, is that green chemistry touches so many aspects of society that it lets me be who I want to be at any given minute. And that diversity is what I love most of everything. Yeah.
Are you happier doing what you're doing than working for some large corporation where you clearly could be making all kinds of...
All right, you're going to drive me in a very deep philosophical space, because
Okay.
I have children that ask this, because
And
they
you have
think,
to feed them.
John, Dad, you've found what you love. You're just so passionate about what you love. I want to find that in my life. And I say to them, you're missing the point. If you locked me in the closet with a paper bag, I would be thrilled. I would love it, because I choose to be passionate about whatever I'm doing. It isn't the world giving you a passionate direction. It's you being passionate about no matter what it is you're doing. That's what it's all about. And so I would be passionate if I was working in industry. I'd be passionate wherever I am.
Okay.
I would be who I am.
Fair. That's a fair enough answer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we do have to wrap it up.
Okay.
Class is winding down, so thank you, John. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Dr. Warner.
Yeah.
And thank you for the work you're doing. And I think it's a little bit more than that. I will say you have made certain choices in your work to do really incredible stuff,
Thank you.
to help others, to not put toxic products in the environment, and to create things that give us alternatives that are affordable, and that's key. So I thank you so much for that, and I thank my students for being here today and
you.
listening and asking great questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you.